5 years after my daughter's death, she appeared in the garden. And what I discovered next changed everything. "Mom, I'm home." Standing before me as I was working in the garden was my daughter, who should have died at the age of 6, 5 years ago. I was seriously injured in a car accident along with my daughter. I couldn't even get out of bed, let alone attend my daughter's funeral. That's why I couldn't say goodbye and was plunged into deep sorrow for a long time. I stood there dumbfounded, wondering if I was seeing a vision. As I was too shocked to speak, my grown daughter began to reveal a shocking truth. Actually, at that time, after hearing her story, I decided to send that person to hell. My husband, Ian, started a company after marrying me. When he first started the business, I was struggling to manage the mortgage and living expenses. Of course, I economized on food, clothing, and household goods wherever I could, supporting him with all my might. During that time, our daughter, Sophia, was born, and though it was tough, we spent happy days together. After about 4 years, my husband's business started to take off, and we gradually had a little more financial breathing room. "It's all thanks to you. Thank you." I was genuinely happy to hear his words of gratitude, and I felt I could work even harder. My hobby at that time was gardening, and my daughter always helped me water the plants. Sophia was bright, honest, and a very lovely daughter. I was proud of her. The time we spent together in the garden, under the warm sunlight, was our special moment. However, that happiness didn't last long. I started to feel lonely at home around the time Sophia turned 6. My husband's spending habits became extravagant, and he started coming home late more often. Sometimes I could smell women's perfume on the suits he asked me to take to the dry cleaners. I tried to convince myself that he had to socialize with business partners, but the uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. One day, after dropping my daughter off at kindergarten and catching my breath, I received a phone call from my husband. "I forgot some documents I need for a meeting today. Bring them to the office right away." His voice sounded unusually flustered. "Okay, where are the documents?" "They should be in the drawer of my desk in my room. It's a blue file. Hurry up and bring it." The call ended before I could even respond. I felt irritated by my husband's arrogant attitude. As his work got on track and his income increased, Ian changed. Until Sophia was about 2 years old, no matter how busy he was, he would take her to the park on weekends or play with her before bed. Even on ordinary days, he would often buy clothes, stuffed animals, or toys to please our daughter. However, he gradually started going out on weekends with various excuses and stopped being involved in childcare altogether. Moreover, he began to say terrible things like, "Who do you think you're able to live thanks to?" Or, "If you have any objections, say them after you earn as much as I do." I found the documents in my husband's desk drawer and headed to Ian's company. Later, I went out to buy a school bag for Sophia, who was about to start elementary school. She was so adorable, looking at various colorful bags and asking, "Mom, how about this one? Does it suit me?" I couldn't help but smile, forgetting all my complaints about my husband as we spent a lovely time together. The light purple bag with the lace-like pattern was cute, but the pink bag with the embroidery was lovely too. On the bus ride home, I smiled at the sight of my daughter sitting with her arms folded, pondering with a serious face. "It's hard to decide, isn't it? We still have time, so you can think about it carefully." "Yes, I'll find my absolute favorite." After that, we got off the bus at our usual stop, and when we were about 5 minutes away from home, I suddenly heard the loud engine sound of a sports car in the distance. When I turned around, I saw a car speeding towards us. I couldn't even scream. All I could do was instinctively hug Sophia. I heard the screams of passers-by, and the next moment, I felt an incredible impact on my body before losing consciousness. The next time I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. I saw a white ceiling, and it took me a while to understand that I wasn't at home. We were looking at bags. On our way home, then a car came towards us, and then my whole body ached just from breathing, and I could barely move, but all I could think about was my daughter's safety. I pressed the nurse call button, enduring the pain, and soon a nurse and doctor came running, saying they would contact Ian. Apparently, I had been asleep for 3 days. 30 minutes later, when he arrived at the hospital and entered the room, he looked at me and muttered, "So you're alive?" Then let out a sigh. "What about Sophia?" I asked my husband in a hoarse voice as he came to the side of the bed. By the time I got to the hospital, she was already, he told me without making eye contact, seeming to look off into the distance. When the ambulance arrived, my daughter was already in critical condition, and treatment didn't help in time. No! Although I understood the meaning of his words, I was too shocked to even cry. It didn't feel real, as if I was having a bad dream. And while I was in the hospital, Sophia's funeral had already been completed. A month after the accident, when I was discharged and returned home, the house was eerily quiet. There was only a smiling photo of Sophia in the living room. Unable to see my daughter's final moments, I was consumed by deep despair. In the depths of my despair, I couldn't do anything. I spent my days just crying. I even lost all interest in gardening, which I had loved so much. Why don't you try to look forward already? Sophia won't rest in peace if you keep being like this. My husband's words, sounding exasperated, reached my ears, but I couldn't accept them. I couldn't even imagine how to live a life without my daughter. That's impossible. No matter what I did or where I went, the hole in my heart couldn't be filled. I kept remembering how my daughter used to help me with cooking, folding laundry, and watering the garden, and tears would involuntarily flow. Perhaps disgusted by my state, Ian started spending more nights away from home. About 5 years after losing my daughter, my heart had recovered enough to engage in my old hobby of gardening. Who would have thought that nurturing plants could be so healing? Sophia used to help me water the plants too. There were many moments in my daily life when I would suddenly remember Sophia, but I no longer cried uncontrollably like before. I was gradually overcoming the past and starting to think about the future. On one such day, just before noon, I was out in the garden, taking advantage of the good weather, rearranging flower pots while considering different combinations. That's when I heard a sound from the door connecting the parking lot to the garden. Who could it be? When I looked up, there stood my daughter, who was supposed to have died 5 years ago. She had grown into a young woman, but I could still see traces of the Sophia I remembered. "Mom, I'm home," she called out hesitantly, and I was too surprised to say anything. I just stared at her in amazement, unable to move, wondering if I was dreaming or seeing some kind of illusion. "How?" That was all I could say after a while. "Mom, listen carefully. Actually," the shocking truth my daughter told me filled me with a rage I had never felt before. Everything had been orchestrated by Ian. Unforgivable. I decided to send my husband to hell. From now on, I would live for Sophia's happiness. I vowed not to cry anymore. A few weeks later, Ian was unusually spending his day off at home. "Honey, can I talk to you for a moment? Can you explain this?" I placed several photos in front of him as he was lounging on the sofa watching TV. They showed my husband entering various houses and supermarkets with an unknown woman. "What are these?" "I took them while following you. I've been suspecting you of having an affair because you've been coming home late or not coming home at all more often." He picked up the photos and laughed scornfully. "Since Sophia died, you've been moping around with a gloomy face every day, right? It's only natural not to want to come home when I see that." He tapped the photos with his finger and said brazenly, "This house is a place I'm renting near the office for work. That woman is the housekeeper, so of course she's going in and out of the house." "I see." Seeing my meek attitude, my husband grinned confidently. "Those photos don't prove anything." He crossed his arms and leaned back, seemingly emboldened. "Well, that might be fine, but..." Just as my husband looked puzzled by my words, my cell phone rang loudly. I answered the phone without any explanation. "What? Now? Is this conversation over?" As he spoke irritably, I showed him the video call screen, and his face changed instantly. "Hello, Mom. I had asked Sophia to call me." "Huh? What's going on?" Actually, when she came to visit me, she had a smartphone hanging around her neck. She told me that Ian was managing her cell phone. So I came up with the idea of registering Sophia's and my numbers under fake names in each other's phones without Ian knowing and asked for my daughter's cooperation. I might have forgiven you for the affair, but I can't forgive you for lying about Sophia's death. I want you to confess everything. Faced with the intensity of my daughter on the phone and me, my husband involuntarily stood up and stepped back. I could see his eyes darting around, clearly agitated. What Sophia had told me that day was unforgivable. When we had the accident, I was severely injured and taken to a hospital with an intensive care unit. But due to capacity issues, my daughter was taken to a different hospital. Ian had lied to me, saying our daughter died, and to Sophia, saying I died. Furthermore, around the time our daughter was discharged, my husband rented a house in the neighboring town, saying, "It's better to be closer to the hospital for Sophia's rehabilitation." Sophia told me that soon after, a woman started living with them. You told Sophia she was an acquaintance of yours who would take care of her, didn't you? As I questioned him, sweat began to bead on my husband's forehead. That's right. I thought Sophia would be lonely if she was alone for long periods, so I hired that housekeeper in the photo. But that's strange, isn't it, Sophia? I asked, looking at my daughter's face through the screen. Yes, because Stephanie, who Dad brought as a housekeeper, says mean things like she's going to marry Dad and that I'm in the way. Apparently, Stephanie, who started living in the same house, always came home late at night and was asleep when Sophia left for school. My daughter would prepare her own breakfast and go to school, and by the time she returned home, Stephanie would leave for work. Stephanie didn't do any housework at all, and although Ian sometimes brought food home, Sophia ended up doing most of the housework herself. When Dad wasn't around, Stephanie told me to tell you to get a divorce quickly. That's when I started to think that maybe Mom was still alive. My daughter had come to check on me by herself, taking trains and buses, asking passersby for directions along the way. I don't want to live with that person anymore. As Sophia pleaded with a face on the verge of tears, my heart ached. Dad has been lying to me all this time, saying that Mom was dead. I can't trust Dad anymore. Thinking about how much she must have endured living like that, I felt that I absolutely couldn't let her suffer anymore. Pushed by my daughter's words, I took out more photos. I have these too. They showed Ian and Stephanie walking arm in arm, entering pubs and hotels. The stores in those photos were the same ones I had seen on a business card that fell out of his suit jacket pocket when he once asked me to take it to the dry cleaners. Stephanie works at this store, doesn't she? My husband's eyes widened at those words. You've been betraying me and having an affair since 5 years ago. I glared at Ian as I said this. His face turned red as he realized his lies had been exposed, and he started trembling. Suddenly, he slammed his fist on the table and crumpled the photos in his hand. Startled by his sudden action, I stiffened, and my enraged husband threw the photos at me. Call the police. Feeling threatened by Ian's behavior, I pleaded with my daughter and ended the call. What? Don't be ridiculous. Everything's ruined because you two are alive. My husband, now in a frenzy, approached me with a look I had never seen before. I was supposed to send you both to the other world and live happily with Stephanie. Stunned by his unexpected words, I was at a loss. It turns out that the accident Sophia and I had been in was not an unfortunate incident. Apparently, he had hired an acquaintance of Stephanie's to run us over with a car. When we were seriously injured but our lives were not in danger, he was forced to change his plans, and ended up living a double life between our home and his mistress's house. Of course, the story about having completed our daughter's funeral was also a lie. If you two had died in the accident as planned, I would have gained sympathy from everyone around me and even collected the insurance money. My husband's face contorted as he clenched his fists. Too bad your plan didn't work out. I can't live with you anymore. I've already consulted a lawyer, and you're going to pay alimony and child support properly. Enraged by my words, he actually picked up the remote control from the table and threw it at me. As I dodged it, the remote hit the wall with a loud bang. Just as Ian shouted, "Don't run away!" and grabbed a vase, we heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Suddenly panicked, he looked out the window and started to get flustered. Did you really call the police? Is Sophia planning to turn me in? Ian's face turned pale. Please don't do this. Don't do this. I'll lose everything. My company, Stephanie, everything. Think hard about what you've done while you're in prison. Disgusted that even in this situation, he didn't mention my or our daughter's names, I coldly declared, as footsteps approached and police officers entered the room. A panicked Ian actually threw the vase he was holding at them. Stay back. Stop. The officers skillfully restrained my husband, who resisted violently until the very end. Thanks to our daughter's report and her actions, he was taken away. After that, I divorced Ian and received a lump sum payment of $300,000 for alimony, child support, and division of property. His company was in an uproar the day after his sudden arrest. I received numerous phone calls, but I simply stated the facts calmly. Ian ended up losing everything, his family and his social credibility. He must be regretting his actions now, but even